Treasures from Grandma by Arleta Richardson. Illustrated by Jerde. Chapter 2. A New Friend. Sarah Jane and I were approaching the schoolyard one morning, talking about nothing in particular, when we both came to a dead stop. There stood a new girl leaning against a tree watching the other children play. "Who do you think that is?" Sarah Jane asked. "I didn't know anyone new had moved in." "I don't know," I said, "but she has the reddest hair I've ever seen. Do you suppose she has a temper to match?" "I hope not," Sarah Jane replied. "I wouldn't want that much mad directed at me." We walked over to greet her. "I'm Mabel," I said. "What's your name?" "Mary Etta Rose Amanda Morgan." Sarah Jane's mouth dropped open. 4 given names? Do you use all of them?" "Just Mary. My mother didn't want to disappoint any of her sisters, so she named me after all of them. I hope we're going to be friends," she continued. "I don't know anyone here at all." Miss Gibson came out just then to ring the bell, and we all filed into the schoolhouse. Mary was welcomed and settled into a seat behind Sarah Jane and me. During study time, I felt a poke in my back. "Who's that good-looking boy by the second window?" Mary whispered. I looked to see who she meant. "That's my brother Roy," I whispered back. "Your brother?" Mary squeaked, and Miss Gibson looked disapprovingly in our direction. No more was said until recess time. Then Mary took hold of my arm and drew me to the side of the school. "I think we should be best friends, don't you?" she said. "We can have secrets from all the others." "I've never had a secret from Sarah Jane," I blurted. "What would we want to keep from her?" "For goodness sake, Mabel," Mary exclaimed. "Maybe it's time you got away from her. I could tell right away that Sarah Jane wasn't as mature and interesting as you are. There are lots of things that we could talk about that she wouldn't even understand." This was a new idea to me, and I stared at Mary in fascination. Was I really mature and interesting? "By the way," Mary went on, "how old is your brother?" "He's almost 15, I replied. "Why?" "I just wondered," she said with a shrug. "Does he have a girlfriend?" "A girlfriend? Roy? He thinks the only thing girls are good for is to tease." "Don't worry," Mary said. "He'll change his mind. Come on, let's get a drink of water." She sauntered toward the well, and I tagged along after her. If she wanted the boys to notice her, she wasn't disappointed. "They couldn't help but see her," Sarah Jane said to me on the way home. "Her hair stands out like a fire in a wood box. You'd better watch out, Mabel, or you'll get into trouble." I stopped in my tracks and stared at her. "Me? What have I done to be in trouble?" "Nothing yet, I guess. But if you're around that Mary Etta Rose Amanda Morgan very much, she'll see to it that you do something." "That's ridiculous," I exclaimed. "All she said was that she wanted to be friends." "And?" Sarah Jane prodded. "She asked how old Roy was and if he had a girlfriend," I finished lamely. "Aha!" Sarah Jane cried. "See there? She's trying to use you to get to your brother." "Nobody uses me for anything," I shouted at her. "I think you're just jealous." I stomped away from Sarah Jane with my nose in the air. Then I turned and went back. "Why are we even fighting over someone we don't even know?" I asked her. "Do you really think Mary would try to do that?" Sarah Jane nodded. "I'm sure of it, Mabel. Something tells me she's not up to any good. I just feel it in my bones." In the days that followed, Mary continued to single me out for special favors. She brought candy and chocolate cake for lunchtime. She loaned me a book to take home. I was flattered, but I made sure we spent lunch and recess with all the other girls. One Friday, about a month after Mary arrived, Sarah Jane was sick and I walked to school alone. Mary walked out to meet me. "Come here, Mabel. I have something to show you." I followed her to the corner of the schoolyard. "What is it?" I asked. "Is it a secret?" Mary nodded and pulled a small box out of her dress pocket. "Look," she whispered. She opened the box, and there lay the most beautiful ring I had ever seen.
"Ooh, where did you get it?" "Someone gave it to me," she replied. "Do you like it? Here, try it on."
I put the ring on my finger.
"You can have it if you'll do something for me,"
Mary said.
"Have it? You mean to keep?"
She nodded.
"Do you want it?" "What do you want me to do?"
Mary looked around to be sure no one could hear.
"I want you to get Roy to come over to my house." "How would I ever do that?" I exclaimed. "He's never done anything I asked him to do in his life."
Mary thought for a moment.
"Tell him my Aunt Rose wants him to do some work for her."
"Does she?"
"No, but that doesn't make any difference. He won't find out that until he gets there. By then, it will be too late."
I opened my mouth to say it would be dishonest, but just then the bell rang. We hurried into the schoolroom, where I had a hard time concentrating on my lessons. Visions of the beautiful ring kept getting in the way. What if I were to tell Roy that Mary said her aunt wanted him to do some work for her? That wouldn't be a lie, would it? No, but it would be deceitful. Was the ring worth it? At recess, Mary pulled me away from the others again.
"Are you going to do it?"
she asked. I shook my head.
"No, I can't tell Roy something that isn't true." "He wouldn't know it wasn't true," she persisted.
"Maybe not," I replied, "but I would. I just couldn't do it."
"I thought you were different from these other kids,"
Mary said in disgust.
"But you're as dumb as they are. You'll be sorry."
She turned and walked away, and I followed her slowly back to the schoolhouse. I stopped by to tell Sarah Jane about it on the way home.
"So it looks as though I lost a friend and a ring," I concluded. "I didn't see the ring," Sarah Jane declared, "but you wouldn't have lost much of a friend. I wonder why she said you'd be sorry." "I don't know," I replied. "Maybe she'll give it to someone else with a brother. The worst thing she can do is refuse to talk to me anymore, and I'm not sure that would be bad."
But that wasn't the worst thing Mary could do. On Monday morning, Ma called to me as I started out for school.
"Will you take this recipe to Miss Gibson? She asked me about it at church yesterday. Here, I'll put it into your sweater pocket."
As Ma tucked the paper in my pocket, she felt something hard in the corner.
"What's this?"
she asked and drew it out. I stared in astonishment at Mary's ring.
"I don't know how it got there," I told Ma. "I didn't take it, honest." "Of course you didn't," Ma said, "but it didn't jump into your pocket either. You'd better get it back to Mary as soon as possible."
Sarah Jane and I talked it over on the way to school.
"I think I'll just put it on her desk and not say anything about it," I decided. "I wouldn't," Sarah Jane declared. "I'd let everyone know she tried to make me look guilty. She shouldn't get away with that." "Maybe she didn't put it there," I suggested. "Maybe someone else took it and—" "Oh, Mabel, you know that isn't the way it happened. She threatened to get even with you, didn't she? So this is the way to do it."
We got to the school just as the bell rang, and I had no chance to speak to Mary. As soon as school was opened, she raised her hand.
"Miss Gibson, someone took my ring."
"Oh, I don't think so, Mary," Miss Gibson replied. "You must have just mislaid it. Have you looked through your desk?" Mary shook her head.
"No, ma'am, I didn't mislay it. I know who took it because I saw it on her finger. It was Mabel Odell."
In the silence that followed, I could feel my face getting red. If Mary had wanted to make me look guilty, she had succeeded. My mouth opened, but not a word came out. "Is this true, Mabel?" Miss Gibson asked me. "Do you have Mary's ring?"
"No, yes, ma'am. That is, I have the ring, but I didn't take it."
"That's a likely story," Mary snorted.
"How would you get it if you didn't take it?"
"Where's the ring now, Mabel? Would you bring it to me, please?" Miss Gibson held out her hand, and I walked to the front of the room and handed it to her. "Where did you get it?" she asked me.
"I found it in my pocket," I said. "I just discovered it this morning."
And you didn't put it there. I shook my head.
No, ma'am. Someone had to put it in your pocket, Mary accused. If you didn't, who did?
She looked triumphantly at Miss Gibson. That's a question, all right, Miss Gibson said. We'll have to find out who it was.
Her,
said a little voice from the front row.
I saw her do it.
Belinda was pointing at Mary. Miss Gibson looked confused, and Mary was angry.
Are you going to believe that, little infant?
She spluttered. Belinda, are you sure? Miss Gibson asked her. When did you see this happen?
On Friday,
Belinda said.
Right after school. She put the ring in Mabel's pocket, and then she ran outside. I saw her.
Miss Gibson looked at me and then back at Mary. I'll keep the ring and we'll talk about this at recess. Open your books, please, and begin to study at once. I returned to my seat and opened my book, but I didn't see much that was in it. What if Miss Gibson didn't believe Belinda? How could I prove that I hadn't taken the ring? It was a long wait until recess. As soon as the others had left, Miss Gibson turned to Mary. Why did you want us to think Mabel had stolen your ring? She asked her. Do you realize what a serious accusation this is?
But she did,
Mary began. Then, as Miss Gibson looked at her steadily, she began to cry.
I thought Mabel would be my friend, but she wouldn't do what I wanted her to.
Is someone a friend only when she does as you say? Miss Gibson asked gently. I think you have the wrong idea about friendship. Perhaps you can ask Mabel to forgive you and start over again. Mary glanced at me sullenly.
Sorry,
she muttered.
That was the unsorriest sorry I ever heard,
I told Sarah Jane later.
But I don't think she'll try something like that again. And your bones were right. You felt trouble and it came. They're very seldom wrong, Sarah Jane replied smugly. The sooner you learn to trust them, the happier you'll be. We laughed and headed for home together.
End of chapter 2.